February 18th, 1977, London. A 25-year-old journalist steps out of a townhouse into freezing rain. In his coat pocket, a cassette tape. On that tape, 3 hours of testimony about a secret so dangerous, the British government will try to bury him for it. He makes it exactly 14 steps. Stop! Special branch! And gets in handcuffs, charged as a traitor for asking questions. But here's what those officers don't know. They just made the worst mistake of their careers. Because that tape, it's only the beginning. There's a network out there. 33 white domes rising from the English moors, satellite dishes in the Australian desert, listening posts in New Zealand, Canada, West Virginia, all connected. And every single day, this network is pulling 300 million messages from the air. Your phone calls, your emails, and your whispered conversations with loved ones. All captured, sorted, and stored. 5 governments built it. 5 governments swore it didn't exist. The system's code name? ECHELON. And the most insane part? Duncan Campbell cracked it using physics, declassified papers, and documents pulled from a military dumpster. How did one man expose 5 nations' darkest secrets? And what happens when they can't silence him? February 18th, 1977, London. 2 men step out of a North London townhouse into freezing rain. Their coats are soaked. Their hearts are hammering so hard they can barely breathe. They've just spent 3 hours interviewing a former Army signals officer about British spy operations, and what he told them changes everything. Duncan Campbell, 25 years old, tucks a cassette tape into his jacket pocket. His hands are shaking, but not from cold, from what's on that tape. Secret listening posts scattered across the globe, code-named programs that don't appear in any budget, an entire surveillance apparatus so classified that even Parliament doesn't know it exists. The man they interviewed, John Barry, a signals intelligence veteran, just revealed that Britain is monitoring radio and telephone traffic on an industrial scale. Not enemy communications, everyone's communications. Duncan has the proof in his pocket. All he has to do is get home. They barely reach the street, and then, stop! Special branch! Dark overcoats swarm from the shadows. Badges flash under streetlights. Before Duncan can react, his arms are wrenched behind his back. Steel bites into his wrists. The cassette tape is ripped from his pocket, and he's thrown against a wall. His crime? Asking questions the government didn't want answered. Within hours, Duncan sits in a cell, charged under the Official Secrets Act for receiving information useful to an enemy. The maximum sentence? 14 years in prison. A journalist prosecuted like a traitor for doing his job. But here's what the government didn't understand about Duncan Campbell. This wasn't his first collision with the secret state. And it wouldn't break him. It would forge him. 1 year earlier, in 1976, he published The Eavesdroppers in Time Out magazine, the first article to ever name GCHQ publicly. That story detonated like a bomb in Whitehall. His American co-author was deported within weeks. Duncan, a British citizen, couldn't be expelled, so MI5 did something else. They put him under constant surveillance, tails following him everywhere, phone taps on every line, and shadow cars parked outside his flat. He was 24 years old, and already marked as one of the most dangerous men in Britain. Not because he carried a weapon, because he carried the truth. The ABC trial, named for Aubrey, Barry, and Campbell, becomes a circus that exposes the rot at the heart of British intelligence. Much of it is held in secret, the public barred from hearing testimony about their own surveillance. But then something extraordinary happens. The jury foreman is exposed as a former Special Forces operative who'd been actively lobbying for conviction before the trial even began. British justice collapses into farce. The judge is furious. The prosecution's case implodes in humiliation. Duncan is found technically guilty on a minor count. His punishment? Nothing. He walks free. The official secrets charges disintegrate like wet paper. The government wanted to silence him. Instead, they just made him famous and angry. But something happened during that trial that would haunt Duncan for the next 2 decades. During testimony, a witness accidentally mentioned a British signals unit in Cyprus, a listening post so classified that the judge forbade naming it in open court. The witness went pale, the prosecutors scrambled, and Duncan's mind started racing. If one remote base in Cyprus is vacuuming up global conversations, how many others exist? Where are they? And what exactly are they listening to? Duncan was about to find out. But before we continue, quick word from our sponsor. If you're watching this, you're clearly into programming, cybersecurity, and understanding how systems actually work. And here's the thing. The best way to truly understand technology is to build it yourself. That's where boot.dev comes in. Boot.dev teaches you back-end web development the way it should be taught, by doing. Python, SQL, Go, real programming languages used in real jobs. You're not watching lectures and falling asleep. You're solving challenges, building actual projects, and earning XP like it's an RPG. I've been messing around on the platform, and honestly, it's addictive. They've got an AI tutor called Boots, a bear wizard, of all things, who's trained on every lesson and actually helps you think through problems instead of just handing you answers. The median salary for back-end developers is over $100,000, and most of these jobs fully remote. Go to boot.dev and use my code Blackfiles to get 25% off your entire first year on the annual plan. Links in the description. Now, back to Duncan Campbell, who's about to spend years hunting something no one believes exists. Early 1980s. While every other journalist in Britain chases political scandals and celebrity gossip, Duncan Campbell is doing something strange. He's spending his nights in dusty libraries, his weekends in obscure archives, and his savings on trips to remote corners of the world. He's hunting an invisible web, a network of clandestine listening stations spanning continents, and he's doing it alone. The work is maddening. It starts with scraps. A budget memo here, a technical manual there, telecom records that don't quite add up, defense procurement reports with suspicious redactions. This isn't glamorous journalism. It's radio spectra analysis at 2 a.m., satellite orbit calculations with pencil and ruler, endless bad coffee and eye strain and dead ends. Most people would have quit after a month. Duncan has been at it for years. Then comes the break that changes everything. Yorkshire peace activists have been camping near Menwith Hill, protesting the strange white domes but having no idea what happens inside. So they try something desperate. They raid the base's trash. One day they hand Duncan a bundle of discarded documents, papers pulled from Menwith Hill's dumpsters, still damp from rain. Duncan flips through the stack. Most of it is technical jargon. Meaningless acronyms, procurement codes. His heart sinks. Another dead end. Then he sees it. A fragment. Just a few words on a maintenance log. A project code word, ECHELON. It sounds like fiction, like something from a spy novel. But the name keeps appearing, on diagrams of antenna arrays, in memos about satellite receivers, in references to partner nations and intelligence sharing. Duncan's hands start to shake. Not from fear this time, from recognition. This is it. This is the network. His investigation accelerates. Using his physics training, he calculates where geostationary communications satellites hang in orbit, then deduces which ground stations would be positioned to intercept them. He cross-references microwave transmission paths. He tracks down former employees and contractors willing to speak in confidence, their voices trembling as they describe what they've seen. The picture that emerges is staggering. Pine Gap in the Australian outback, 33 satellite antennas beneath 19 white domes, gleaming under desert sun in a facility so secret that Australian politicians aren't allowed inside. Waihopai Valley in New Zealand, guarded by sheep and silence, its dishes pointed at the sky. A remote facility in Canada. NSA outposts buried in the mountains of West Virginia and the forests of Washington state. These aren't isolated sites. They're nodes in a single, globe-spanning network. And the same 5 flags fly over all of them. United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. This is the 5 Eyes, an alliance most people have never heard of, operating a surveillance system that can intercept virtually any communication on Earth. But Duncan knows something else, something that makes this personal. He knows they're watching him too. The tales have never stopped, the phone clicks never stopped. Every step he takes toward the truth, someone is documenting. And in 1986, he discovers exactly how far they're willing to go to stop him. January 1987. Duncan is working on a BBC documentary about a top-secret British spy satellite project codenamed Zircon. The film will reveal that Britain has been hiding a billion-pound surveillance satellite from its own parliament. It's the kind of story that ends careers in government. Before the documentary can air, secret police break into his home, again. They seize papers, tapes, everything. Simultaneously, in a coordinated raid, police storm BBC Scotland's offices in Glasgow, confiscating the Zircon film reels. Duncan's front door is kicked in for the second time in a decade. The message from on high couldn't be clearer. Back off, stop digging, or we will destroy you. Duncan's response? He knows he must be getting close. August 1988. After years assembling the puzzle, Duncan is ready to go public. He compiles everything into an article for the New Statesman. The title is almost understated. Somebody's listening. But what's inside isn't understated at all. For the first time in history, he reveals a coordinated surveillance system codenamed ECHELON, operated by the Five Eyes Alliance, a global network of electronic spy stations that can intercept virtually any telephone call, fax, or telex message. Vast computer databases storing and searching millions of captured communications, financial transactions tracked across borders. In short, much of the world's private correspondence is being quietly collected and analyzed by a US-led intelligence partnership. He publishes the article. And then, nothing. Government spokesmen issue bland denials or stay silent. Officials in London and Washington smirk and wave away the claims as paranoid fantasy. The public, preoccupied by the Cold War's endgame, barely notices. To most people, it sounds like science fiction. Officially, ECHELON doesn't exist. And who's going to believe one journalist over 5 governments? Inside NSA and GCHQ, though, the reaction is very different. Panic. An outsider has just sketched the blueprint of their crown jewel. He named the stations, identified the satellites, and exposed the partnerships. Everything they've spent decades hiding is now in print. But they can't respond without confirming it's true. So they do the only thing they can. They stay silent and hope the story dies. Imagine spending years of your life, risking your freedom, your career, your safety, to uncover a truth this explosive, and then watching the world shrug. Most people would quit, but Duncan doubles down. He writes about ECHELON in niche journals. He speaks at hacker conferences. He shares his research with anyone who will listen, a lone voice shouting into the wind, year after year, waiting for someone, anyone, to hear. What Duncan doesn't know is that across the world, other people are starting to ask the same questions. And the cracks are about to appear. Mid-1990s. Nearly a decade has passed since Duncan's revelation. ECHELON remains a ghost, something intelligence insiders whisper about, but the public has forgotten. Duncan is starting to wonder if he'll ever be believed. Then everything changes. On the other side of the world, a New Zealand writer named Nikki Hager publishes a book called Secret Power. Using inside sources, Hager exposes how his tiny country's listening posts feed into the wider ECHELON system. A small nation, population 4 million, plugged directly into the world's most powerful surveillance network, pressured to spy on its neighbors or be kicked out of the club. Around the same time, a former NSA contractor named Margaret Newsham quietly tells a congressional staffer something explosive. She worked on a surveillance program called ECHELON, and it was so all-encompassing it intercepted the phone calls of a sitting U.S. senator, an American spying program, listening to American lawmakers. The implications are staggering. These accounts barely make headlines, but within intelligence circles and among privacy advocates, they land like bombs. Campbell isn't alone anymore. The whispers are turning into shouts. Then comes the evidence that makes European politicians lose their minds. 1994. The aerospace giant Airbus is competing for a $6 billion contract in Saudi Arabia. They're confident they'll win. The negotiations are going well. Then, suddenly, Boeing swoops in and steals the deal. Airbus executives are blindsided. How did Boeing know exactly what to offer? How did they know Airbus's strategy? The answer leaks out slowly. NSA eavesdropping. American intelligence intercepted Airbus executives' communications and discovered they were offering bribes. The NSA passed this intelligence to Boeing, not to fight corruption, but to help an American company win. French officials are apoplectic. Their industries are being spied on by their own allies, under the guise of national security. By the late 90s, European newspapers finally pick up the scent. Enormous US spy system. ECHELON said to monitor Europe. What once sounded like wild conspiracy now has politicians demanding answers. Are the Americans reading our emails? Listening to our phone calls? Stealing our business secrets? The pressure keeps building. Even across the Atlantic, a few American officials start paying attention. In 1999, Congressman Bob Barr, a former CIA officer turned privacy crusader, demands answers about ECHELON. He warns that Americans' own rights might be at risk. He hauls NSA officials before Congress. They stonewall, they deny, they evade. But for the first time, the most secretive agency in the US government faces pointed public questions about its listening programs. A crack of sunlight breaks through the blackout. In 1998, the European Parliament decides it can no longer ignore what's happening. It commissions an official report to assess the surveillance allegations. And who do they turn to? The one man who's been on this case from the beginning. The freelancer they once dismissed as paranoid. The journalist two governments tried to imprison. Duncan Campbell is asked to write an official briefing for European lawmakers. The tables have completely turned. Duncan pours everything he knows into what becomes the 1999 STOA report. Interception Capabilities 2000. Hundreds of pages of evidence. Satellite coordinates, base locations, interception techniques, and partnership agreements. Its conclusion leaves zero room for doubt. A global interception system exists. It is called ECHELON, and it is scanning civilians' communications on a vast scale right now as you read this. By early 2000, the European Parliament launches a full-blown inquiry. A special committee is formed to investigate ECHELON. Duncan's long-sidelined crusade suddenly has the attention of the most powerful institutions in Western democracy. He's summoned to Brussels to testify before members of the European Parliament in public hearings. As he packs his files, decades worth of notes, documents, declassified papers, satellite photos, Duncan feels something he hasn't felt in years: vindication. After 23 years of being called paranoid, crazy, a conspiracy theorist, someone finally wants to hear the truth. But walking into that hearing room will be the greatest test of his life, because 5 governments are about to do everything in their power to make sure no one believes him. And Duncan has to be more persuasive than all of them combined. Brussels, April 2001. The hearing room at the European Parliament is packed to capacity. Under harsh fluorescent lights, Duncan Campbell takes his seat at the witness table. In front of him, a microphone, a water glass, and rows of politicians from 15 countries wearing translation headsets. Television cameras line the back wall. This testimony will be broadcast across Europe. He looks at the faces staring back at him. Some are skeptical, arms crossed and eyebrows raised. Some have read his work and are already believers. Others look like they think they're about to watch a crazy person ramble about aliens. Duncan has one chance to make them understand. 23 years of work comes down to the next few hours. He speaks calmly, deliberately, in the measured tone of a scientist presenting data, but his words are dynamite. He pulls out a satellite photograph about Pine Gap in Australia, a base that intercepts thanks to special satellites connected to it, the communications of every single American. The room is silent. Politicians lean forward. He slides a declassified NSA document across the table, a document that describes the technical specifications of the interception system. Suddenly, the room erupts. French delegates are furious. German representatives mutter about sovereignty and betrayal. An Italian delegate asks whether the Vatican has been monitored. No one laughs. Nothing sounds too far-fetched anymore. A British delegate, face red, reads a statement. Everything done in the United Kingdom is in line with a proper legal framework with tight controls. Duncan almost smiles. He knows that for decades, even Britain's own parliament was kept completely in the dark about GCHQ's activities. Tight controls is a fantasy. Other witnesses follow Duncan. James Bamford, the American author who's written more about the NSA than anyone alive, tells the panel that the NSA is far larger than the CIA and poses a greater threat to personal privacy than any intelligence agency in history. Nicky Hager from New Zealand explains how his tiny country was pressured to spy on its Pacific neighbors or be expelled from the Five Eyes Alliance and lose access to American intelligence. Piece by piece, the witnesses paint a picture of a surveillance leviathan operating with almost no democratic oversight. Billions of communications intercepted, zero accountability, zero transparency. And it's been happening for decades. By July 2001, the committee issues its final report. The conclusion is unambiguous. ECHELON is real. It is a network capable of indiscriminate interception of telephone calls, emails, faxes, and more, globally. The report urges European governments to protect their citizens' privacy. It recommends that companies and individuals encrypt all sensitive communications. On September 5, 2001, the European Parliament formally adopts these findings, condemning the unwarranted surveillance of European citizens. Duncan Campbell's once ridiculed claims have been validated at the highest level of democratic government. The secret is out and the conspiracy theorist was right. You'd think the story ends here. Secret exposed, wrongs acknowledged, and case closed. But fate has a dark sense of irony. And what happens next will prove that Duncan Campbell was fighting a war he could never win. September 11, 2001, Duncan Campbell is at home when the news breaks. He watches the towers fall like everyone else. And unlike everyone else, he knows exactly what's coming next. Within weeks, everything changes. The surveillance concerns that consumed Europe for months vanish from the headlines. The word ECHELON disappears from political speeches. Instead, governments everywhere demand more listening, not less. New laws quietly expand electronic eavesdropping powers on both sides of the Atlantic. The Bush administration and Tony Blair's government don't just shelve their qualms about ECHELON, they ramp it up further. Duncan watches with grim recognition. The secret is out, yes, but now it can hide in plain sight. Because who's going to argue against surveillance when towers are falling and people are dying? The ECHELON network doesn't shut down after exposure. It morphs. It grows. The white radomes of Menwith Hill still bulge against the Yorkshire skyline, but the surveillance game evolves far beyond satellites and phone taps. Fiber optic cables, cell phone metadata, web traffic, even social media posts. The targets now aren't just phone calls and faxes. They're the entire digital exhaust of modern life. For years, Duncan continues his work in relative obscurity. He knows the network is expanding. He just can't prove it. Until 2013, when a young NSA contractor named Edward Snowden changes everything. Among Snowden's leaked documents are NSA newsletters from 2011 and 2012 that, for the first time, openly mention the code word ECHELON, describing it as part of a long-running effort to capture satellite communications. One leaked slide lists ECHELON among the NSA's surveillance systems, a belated, undeniable confirmation that Duncan had been right all along. But the Snowden files reveal something even more disturbing. The Five Eyes haven't just maintained their network, they've massively expanded it. They're tapping into the internet backbone, cracking encryption, stockpiling billions of phone and internet records. Every text message, every email, every Google search vacuumed up and stored in data centers the size of shopping malls. And those assurances that we only spy on enemies, not friends? That facade crumbles completely when it emerges that the NSA monitored the personal mobile phone of German Chancellor Angela Merkel, a NATO ally. A leader the US called a friend tapped like a foreign adversary. Duncan Campbell, now in his 60s, finds himself suddenly relevant again. Media outlets call him to help explain the Snowden leaks. He writes front-page analyses for Britain's independent newspaper, drawing lines from the old ECHELON days to the new world of Prism and X-Keyscore. The same man who once analyzed shredded papers from Menwith Hill's dumpsters is now parsing PowerPoint slides from an NSA leaker. And the story is exactly the same, just bigger and worse, just more all-encompassing than anyone imagined. If you want to see how Edward Snowden risked everything to confirm what Duncan Campbell had been saying for decades, check out our video on how the NSA built the most complete surveillance state in human history. The full story is even more disturbing than you think. And thanks again to boot.dev for sponsoring this video. Links in the description. Go learn to code.